In 2001, my daughter was born, and it wasn't long after that, probably 4 months after that, that I started noticing some major severe depression. Didn't know what it was. I hadn't really heard of postpartum and heard of that as a term, but found out after my sisters and my husband encouraged me to go see a doctor that I did in fact have postpartum depression. And then found out after that that mental health runs on both sides of my family, my mother's and my father's, pretty heavily. Didn't know that, which I found was a little strange because had heart disease or pulmonary issues, anything, liver, anything that's dealing with your physical health, if that's something that was on both sides of my family, I think I probably would have known because people would have talked about it. But nobody talked about mental health. So my doctor put me on Lexapro, and I was on that for 16 years. After 16 years, I decided that the side effects were just a lot and was affecting things in my life. So I went to my doctor and asked if I could wean off. Didn't think I needed it, anymore. The drug, it made me feel great, except for the side effects. So the doctor suggested we wean over a 2-week period, but I'm really sensitive to medication. So I asked, let's try this over 3 months. And I weaned super slowly over a 3-month period in hopes that I would start to feel better. About 2.5 months in, I was hit pretty heavily with what was described to me as serotonin syndrome. So for 16 years, my brain was being fed this artificial serotonin from the drug that's made in a lab. Didn't know that, your brain actually produces that by itself. But after 16 years of having it just produced for me, after about 2.5 months, my body was depleting itself of serotonin from the drug. And my body kind of went into shock and started overproducing serotonin and caused me to have all kinds of really bad symptoms like crying spells, insomnia, severe fear, panic attacks that would last for a couple hours. Got to be so much that I couldn't be alone. My husband had to take care of me, basically. If I was at work, I would have to dismiss myself. I couldn't function, and it was terrifying. It took me probably a few weeks before I could get the help I needed. In fact, I remember being at a function for my daughter's school where she was being honored, and my panic attack wouldn't stop. I had to squeeze my husband's hand for the entire time. People kept asking me, what's wrong? And I kept saying I have a migraine because I didn't want to have to try to explain what I was going through. It was my daughter's day. We got home, and I just looked at my husband and said, after weeks of going to urgent care, went to urgent care where they gave me an anti-anxiety. That was horrible. Went to the ER. They gave me Benadryl and sent me home. Nothing was working. And I ended up seeing a PA who gave me some crazy drugs to help me, try to help me through it. Nothing worked. In fact, between the serotonin syndrome symptoms and the new drugs that was being introduced into my body, I became didn't sleep for 3-4 days. I would pace outside in the middle of the night around my house. Was terrified. And I finally, it's hard for me to say this, but I finally understood why people ended their life when they struggle. And told my husband, I'm not there yet, but I can see why. And that was all it took. We decided to go to Alma emergency room, and I explained what was going on with them. I had a great support system there with me, and they finally decided to admit me into inpatient. It was an absolutely amazing experience. They knew exactly what to do. I didn't trust doctors. I didn't want to take any meds. I didn't want to take anything to get better because I figured I wasn't giving the proper tools to wean off this drug, and they were a doctor, so I didn't trust anybody. So I met a wonderful doctor who really worked with me to gain my trust in him, and I essentially had to go back on an antidepressant because I needed it. I didn't think I did, but I did need it. And he explained to me that in order for me to completely wean off this antidepressant, which I needed because mental health runs on both sides of the family, I would have to heavily rely upon benzos. And they're extremely hard to wean off, even harder than what I was dealing with. So I had to go back on an antidepressant. It took me about 2 weeks at inpatient. And then they have a step-down program after you leave inpatient to go to an outpatient program, which was phenomenal. I couldn't believe the care I got. I was dismissed from the outpatient program after a couple weeks, went home, had a relapse. The medication wasn't doing yet what it was supposed to because it hadn't been long enough. So I went back into inpatient for another 2 weeks. So essentially it was like a 6-week time in my life that, while completely terrifying, I found an amazing support of doctors and nurses that helped me. And I can't imagine them making it through without them. But it took me probably about 4 to 6 months before I was completely back to myself. And I shared all that because I feel like medication management is something that's kind of hard, and I'd like people to understand that with these medications, you can't just stop them cold turkey. Really would like to see people find a psychiatrist that they trust, even if they have to travel to Grand Rapids or Saginaw or wherever. I'm from the Mount Pleasant, mid-Michigan area, so it was hard for me to find someone, but even if you have to travel, do that. Find yourself a great psychiatrist that knows these medications and that can help you. And talk therapy, also huge help. But you have to have a really good relationship with your doctor. You have to know your body in hopes that they understand that you know your body too. And trust your therapist. Talk to them about what you're going through so that if you are having issues, you can get in front of it before it's too late. Your mental health is no different than your physical health. I have some family members that struggled with cancer and renal failure, and they went through a lot. So physically, they had to take time off work. They really struggled with their physical abilities to do things, and it was because of their treatments. I learned that it's no different when you're struggling with mental health issues. Your brain is an organ just like your lungs and your heart and everything else. And it's okay to have to treat your brain. We think it's kind of, oh my gosh, she's being treated for mental health issues. Just, shh, let's not talk about this. I learned that it's okay to talk about it, and we should talk about it. Your brain is the most complex organ in our body, and that's what my doctor had said to me. We just think it's taboo to have to treat your brain. When your brain doesn't just affect your thoughts and your emotions, it affects your entire body. It's my hope that people would understand that just because it's your brain, it doesn't mean it's any less than anything else. And I guess, find yourself a great support system. I know I had one. My husband was absolutely amazing. My faith community at my church was absolutely amazing. Another thing I learned to do was know my medication. I researched it in and out and made sure that I knew what would happen if I missed a dose or what would happen if I quit cold turkey. I also had a great relationship with my doctor. So he understood my goals and knew that I was serious about treatment and wanting to get better. I did look to my husband as I was sitting on the floor, begging to, get me somewhere finally that knows how to help me, because I said, I finally understand why people end their lives. Because I wasn't getting a break. I wasn't getting 5 minutes of reprieve. I was getting nonstop, terrified, fear, feel like you're coming inside out, seeing 5 hands, feeling like I was drowning, basically. Imagine what that's like when you don't get a break from it. It's not like you can go to sleep and get 8 hours of sleep and wake up and think, oh, is it going to happen again? It never stopped. It was terrifying. And looking back now, I realized when I looked at my husband how terrifying it must have been for him, for me to say, I can see why people end their lives. I didn't have a plan, but I had a glimpse of the relief I would get if I did. And that was so scary. But getting to a place where people understood that, and doctors that looked at me in the eye and said, I understand what you're going through, and we can help you. You just have to trust us. He picked me up and took me to the bathroom, and my husband bathed me because I couldn't do that for myself. And I remember at that time thinking to myself, wow, this man is something else. At the moment I was so caught up in the fear and the struggle that it didn't hit me what I had there. I had an absolutely amazing man in my life to help me through it. And looking back on that, wow, who can say they had that, right? But when I say get yourself a support system, I mean get someone like that. Get someone who will take care of you, will make sure you take your meds, and will see you through the darkest. Thank the Lord I had him, because, besides my doctors, he's really what got me through. When we're going through something that traumatic, our caregivers are going through it too. He had to, I guess, during inpatient, I wanted my husband there every day as long as I could have him by my side. They were only visiting hours. So he would come after working an 8-hour day, he would come to see me, skip dinner, and come spend time with me. And then he'd drive home, probably not get home till 9 or 10 at night, get up and do it all over again. And then during my outpatient visits, where I would only go for maybe 6 hours a day, and then you come home, I wasn't sleeping, so this man would work all day, come home and be there for when I got home from outpatient, deal with everything you have to deal with a person struggling, and then not sleep because I wasn't sleeping, and he would be up with me, and then go to bed, get up, go to work, and do it all over again. When something is wrong with us physically, we go to the doctor and they immediately say, let's scan this, let's scan your heart, let's scan your lungs, let's find out what's going on, and for physical reasons. But I find it very interesting that we don't scan your brain. We don't scan your brain and say, during our scan we found this was lighting up or that was lighting up in response to this that we tried. I think that would be amazing if we included that into our care for mental health. When I left there, I didn't find it as easy to talk about with people just out in society. So I'm hoping that we can make it more of a conversation that's acceptable.